Well, welcome to another episode of Talk About Black. My name is Dawed Konote Ahulu. Over the last few episodes, we've talked a lot about the issues that affect young black boys and indeed young black men. But what we haven't talked about yet in any detail, but we're going to today, is what does it mean to be a black woman? In 2018, in this society, there is something very peculiar and particular about being a black woman. The way you're perceived, just the way you do your hair. These are big issues that we're going to get into today, and let me introduce my guests. So first of all, I have Bethel Ahonzi. Bethel, welcome. Delighted that you're here. You're a student. Yeah, you're a student at Newcastle University. So we'll hear a little bit about you in just a second. But also welcome to Marissa Hall.
Hi.
You're a director at Willis Towers Watson's Think Ahead Institute. You're an actuary. You've had lots of publications in various industry magazines.
Yep.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank
and Izzy Obang, you're a social entrepreneur and can't wait to hear your story as well. So welcome to all of you. Thank you very much indeed. And why don't we get started with you, Bethel? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm a 19-year-old student studying accounting and finance at Newcastle University. I studied business, accounting and history at A-levels. I really then decided through networking that I would like to go into financial services. I've got one more year of university left, so I'm looking forward to that.
Brilliant. Marissa.
So I am, as you said, the director at the Thinking Ahead Institute, an independent think tank within Willis Towers Watson. I run a number of research projects, and it's all with the aim of working with asset owners and asset managers across the world, changing the investment industry for the better. So yeah.
Great, thank you very much indeed. Izzy, hi.
Hello, yes, so as you said, I am a social entrepreneur. I'm the founding director of Foundervine, which is a social enterprise that helps young people learn what it takes to start a business. And we focus on underrepresented founders, so young women and people of colour. So we help start businesses and we help organisations who are passionate about creating change and increasing diversity in the UK tech ecosystem.
Great. Well, look, let's get into this conversation about what it means to be a black woman in 2018. Let's start by talking about perception and self-image. As you go about your daily lives, as you walk into a restaurant, you walk into a room full of other people, how are you perceived, do you think? Let's get into this question of image, perception, what it means to be a black woman today. Let's start with you, Marissa.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question because I think when I walk into a room, it's generally mixed by surprise. So I work for kind of traditional consultancy, and prior to, getting involved in the Thinking Ahead Institute and being more part of that research side of things at Willis Towers Watson, I was a client-facing consultant, and I was based in Leeds. So I think walking into a room, going in front of trustee boards, which generally tended to fit into the kind of male, quite elderly, I'd say maybe 99% white. I walked into rooms and you could actually see people's faces just in shock. So, what am I doing here? What is she going to bring to me? And I think that what ended up happening is that people tried to put me into different boxes. And so you had the people where it was like, okay, well, tell me your credentials. So then I had to start justifying, right? I've got X years of experience. I'm an actuary. I've worked on your account for such a long time, etc. Then you had other people where they're like, well, where are you from? How did you get here? What are you doing in England? Oh, you speak English so well,
No,
and I think I'm from Trinidad. So basically it's like, oh, it's my first language. But, people just can't quite match you into the boxes that they want. So I think it was that combination of being a professional, being in a position to give them advice, and also them just being, kind of very curious as to how you managed to be there. And one of the things that happened to me was, so I had a client, it was in Glasgow based, and prior to getting married, my surname was MacDonald. So I had lots of kind of email correspondence with the client, we were really on, good par. And I remember walking into the meeting, and then the first thing the client said was, wait, you're not Scottish. And it was, well, I had to kind of go through the long process of, surnames in the Caribbean and the history of slavery. It was a very fascinating discussion for them. But I think that was the first time that I realized that people had put so much, attention to your surname. Whereas in the Caribbean, it was like, well, your surname is what it is. You could be called MacDonald, you could be called O'Reilly. It didn't matter. That was less important. So I think it's just that trying to fit you into a box.
Have you found the same thing, Izzy, as you've made your way through the system? Have you found the same sort of this identity issue? How's it played out for you?
Yeah, I think so. When you are a black woman in professional spaces, you kind of have to navigate what it's like to be a woman in a professional space and what it's like to be black.
Yes, you've got this intersectionality.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, and both of those in themselves bring, different kinds of assumptions and biases against your competency, like you mentioned. And so, going into a room and being the only person of colour is one thing you have to deal with. And so I found that, for example, my first graduate role, I was working with a big accountancy firm, and I walked into the first induction session, 400 new trainees. I was the only person of colour. And you think from this company's recruitment literature that everyone was everyone was Asian, everyone was LGBT. I mean, the image they portrayed was very different from the reality.
So how did that make you feel? You walk in, you're one of 400.
Yeah, so in itself, I think confidence is a massive thing, and I think going through life, I've kind of been taught, that you have to sort of work twice as hard and be really confident in order to get where you want to go. But when you're in an environment like that, it's very easy to question yourself. And I remember being in situations in the beginning where I would say something and it would be completely ignored, and someone else would say the same thing half an hour later and everyone would agree on it. And I thought that was the kind of thing that happened in films, until you're in that situation in real life and suddenly you realise, wow, okay, so I need to play this differently.
And how much of that is about your colour and how much of that is about being a woman? Because presumably there are lots of women who would say, well, I found myself in exactly the same position. There's some guy who picks it up and then runs with what effectively was my idea.
I think the thing about, so with gender, the debate about gender diversity and the fact that we have so many brilliant women who are championing gender diversity in the workplace means that we've gotten to a point where, you might agree, but I feel like women have the potential and the capacity to, assert themselves in the workplace and not necessarily be questioned when it comes to competency.
It's certainly better than it was. I don't think we're not there yet.
Yeah, we're not quite there yet, but it's a lot better than it was, absolutely. And I feel like every person, regardless of who you are and your background, knows a woman or is a woman. However, when you're a person of colour, you go into situations where people just don't have experience interacting and engaging with people of colour. So you find that you start from their conscious and unconscious biases, and you have to kind of work your way through that before they see you as someone who can just get on with the job.
Bethel, we've talked about this.
Is higher.
We've talked about this and this intersectionality of being both a woman of colour and also, both a person of colour, but also being a woman. How has that played out for you?
I think I had a really unique experience growing up. Kind of following on from Marissa's point about trying to fit you into a box, that was really something I struggled with. I remember when I first got into secondary school, people always used to say to me, oh, you're a unique type of black girl, or you're a different type of black girl. And to me that was crazy, because in primary school I liked the things I liked. I was around friends and we all enjoyed the same thing, and outside of school, I had friends who were black females who liked the same type of music as me or doing the same type of things as me. However, when I got into a predominantly black school, I actually found out that people always used to kind of call me, oh, you're an Oreo. And
what's an Oreo?
It's basically, I guess, a black person. In that sense, it's a black person who you look back on the outside but you're really white and inside, and that was to do with just being associated with liking things that are typically known as white things to like. For example, I'm really into indie music, and to them it was really shocking for a black girl to like that kind of music. I think they really just expected me to really just love rap, and I mean, I don't have an issue with rap, but I really do love indie music and I prefer it. So to them it was really weird. I think people didn't kind of understand it, so I was always labelled, oh, the different kind of black girl, and it wasn't I don't think sometimes it was vindictive. I don't think people meant it to come across as being really horrible, but to me it was, why do you feel that way about me? I feel black. Everything I do, I feel like I'm living in this world as a black person. Why do you think that just because I like certain things that you need to associate that with being white? So that was something I really struggled with.
No, I think that's a really interesting point, because I think that's happened to me in the sense that people spend so much time, because you're black, trying to figure you out. It's to your point where, you know, people tend to have a sister, or they have a mother, or they might have like a daughter-in-law, or some sort of female relation around them. But actually, the number of people who have just never had any experience, you know, working or living next to somebody who is black, you know, far less for somebody who's even just an ethnic minority, is astoundingly high. And particularly in the city, you know, you tend to fit into this box. And so to the point where when you do make it, when you do try and prove yourself as a professional, you are somehow different from the black person. You are different from what you should be. And so, you know, I've had comments like, you know, oh, you've integrated so well, or your intellect shines through. You know, shines through what? I don't know. Yeah. Or, you know, you're different from the others. And in my, you know, my husband and I, we always joke about it. We kind of call it the Obama effect, where basically it's like, you know, people are trying to point out that we like you, but only because you're different.
Oh, and that's an interesting point. You almost sort of have a diplomatic immunity.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Is that right? I mean, is that a thing?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one there, because I feel like people, when you're white and you are going into a space, you are just representing yourself. You are just Tim, and you represent Tim. However, if you are the sole minority in a predominantly white space, you end up being like the champion, the chief of all black people, and it's a lot of pressure. And you know, I believe that you should be completely yourself. But there's also a part of me that you know, thinks that you do need to actually present and perform, so people actually ensure that the experience that they have of a person of colour when they meet them is, you know, very good.
Yeah, let's get into
this. Pressure. That's the thing, though. Why should we have to? And I understand your point, particularly from a professional mindset. You have to look the part. You have to be the part.
You have to speak well. You have to do. You kind of perform a lot more. Yeah.
Exactly. But just like how you said, kind of Tim can be Tim. You know, why can't
Bethel be Bethel?
Yeah, why can't you be Bethel?
But with Bethel's point, so it's a really interesting, because we were talking about what it's like in predominantly white spaces, and you mentioned what it was like going into a black school. I think we don't often talk about the fact that when you are a black person who doesn't, you know, I think there are very kind of like challenging kind of ways that we are taught that we need to be if you're black, and if you're going against the grain, if you're listening to indie music and you like rock or whatever it is, when you're in the black community, there are perceptions that aren't always very positive, and so you are navigating a massively complex space where you have to be a social chameleon. You have to be, you know, with your boys, you're this person, with your professional friends, you're this person, with your boss, you're this person, and it's exhausting.
The social chameleon, does that ring true for you?
Yes, I think during secondary school there was a period of time where I did try to fit that mold and that stereotype, and I realised that, you know, because I was behaving in a certain way that my teachers noticed, and it just wasn't me, and I was very unhappy. But I realised that at the end of the day that I wasn't going to be happy unless I kind of embraced who I was, and I'm really, really grateful for actually having friends outside of school who liked these sort of things too, and were also black females. So, you know, I look at them and think, okay, I'm not so strange. But I think by the time I really got to sixth form, it was something that I was really celebrating and I was really open with. But I think that came with a lot of self-love.
And what about the way you look? Is that something that you think about? I mean, before you go out of the front door every morning, do you kind of, how does the society that you're about to walk out into, how does that
we talked about this actually, about interviews. I had an interview yesterday and my hair looks very, very different, and we spoke about that about 2 weeks ago, and the reason why, it's because I've heard some horror stories about, you know, people not getting a job or being perceived a certain way because they have, you know, an afro or big curly hair. So, you know, yesterday when I did go to that interview, I made sure that my hair was straight, and that was just because...
hang on. So you made your hair straight yeah. for the interview?
For the interview.
And let's talk, how do you do that? I mean, how does your hair go straight?
It's normally you just kind of pick up a different wig and you put it on.
And you put it on. But today you felt like it was cool, so I'm going curl.
Yeah, exactly. And me and my sister always have the discussion. And why I actually do it is because in a way you then kind of have to conform to sell yourself out. But how I see it as, okay, I don't want it to be the reason I don't get through the door, because once I get through that door, I can then wear my hair how I feel like I can wear my hair. And, you know, if they then have a problem...
But early on you feel like you need, when you walk through that door, you need to look a certain way.
Exactly.
And so, and this is going to be an interview by people who are predominantly white, presumably.
Yes,
and therefore, so what are you thinking in your mind as you're deciding what hair look you're going to go for today?
It's about this idea of what's considered professional. And I know a lot of times that natural hair is not perceived as professional. I used to actually relax my hair, but that was something I stopped when I was about 14, just because one day I asked my mum, I said to her, why am I relaxing my hair? And she said, Bethel, I don't know. And I decided I was going to stop. So, you know, in the summer especially, I've got my big afro out and I'm like, look at me. And I'm really proud of it. I think when I walk into a room, people start asking questions about my hair and the way it looks. And then in the winter, normally I will have it in a different style, like a weave, like I've got now. So but it would still be in a natural state and it would still be in a natural form because I'm proud of how natural hair looks.
Wow, so let's see, does this turn it be?
I think that's right, and I think it's almost like a two-way street. So on one hand, there is what are people going to think about me when I walk into a room? What is professional? What is not professional? And then on the other hand, there's your own idea of your self-image. And you know, I know for myself, growing up in Trinidad, you know, everybody around me was black or Asian, and all the dolls that I ever had growing up were white. And, you know, white and blonde and blue-eyed. And those were the dolls that you could get. And so you had this kind of unachievable yet aspirational sense of beauty that you could just never get to. But it was fine because I guess everybody around you was black, so these dolls were kind of this outside thing. But then when I moved over to England, actually you started seeing, you know, all of these versions of these white dolls, you know, that I was never previously surrounded by. And then you start thinking to yourself, well, hold on, how do I fit into this society? You know, I couldn't walk around to get hair products. You know, I had to go to, when I used to live in Leeds, you had to go to like a black area to get the hair products. They weren't just like in Boots or, you know, your local hair store. If I wanted tights, you know, I couldn't get skin-colored tights because skin-colored tights meant white, you know, cream. You know, there was no such thing as, you know, kind of wearing tights for black people. And I mean, just any everyday services that you think that you need, you
so in a
actually
million
have to
different
go.
ways,
Absolutely.
you're having to kind of
Fit
go out of
in.
your way to fit in it.
Absolutely.
Is there something just to jump in here? Is this something that you identify with?
I mean, so I think particularly sort of my generation, so I'm 25, and I feel like if you grew up sort of in the 90s, early thousands, and you're a black girl, you probably destroyed your hair at some point. Like, you probably over-relaxed it. You probably like you know, did really, really tight hairstyles. You probably use like really, really terrible quality artificial hair in your hair. You probably coloured it somehow. You probably destroyed your hair. And we didn't grow up with sort of YouTube and all of these natural hair influencers telling us our hair was beautiful and how to look after it. We grew up with parents who didn't necessarily want to look after our hair, who didn't really know sort of how to tell us to look after our hair. So you go through this process of kind of seeing television and seeing what beauty is supposed to look like. So either very light-skinned black women with you know, European hair textures or white women, and you think, okay, so that's what I need to achieve.
And this shapes your idea of
absolutely, and like you said, it's absolutely unobtainable. So you
Yeah.
go to the utmost, and then you end up with all of your hair falling out.
Absolutely.
I recently shaved my head bald.
Really?
I'm completely bald,
I know so many
skin
people
like
that.
proper skinhead,
Yeah.
and that's after probably about 15 years of mistreatment. And I just got to a point. I said to my husband, I'm fed up, and I grabbed his, what do you call it, his sort of shearers, and I just did it in the bathroom mirror.
What's fascinating about that is that actually I know so many people who have done that, where actually they've just got fed up with over-processed our hair, we've damaged it, we've over-colored it. I mean, you know, for me, when I was in primary school, it was about, right, your parents would just put cane rows in, but you were just waiting for that day for you to get to secondary school when you could just put relaxer in it.
The creamy crack. They call it the creamy crack.
Yeah, they
yes.
What's the creamy crack?
Relaxer.
Relaxer, that's the stuff you've got to put on.
Yeah.
So this stuff is presumably, there's a cost to all of this. If you are a young woman and you're trying to maintain your hair the whole time to fit in some way, what does this do to to your pocket. I mean, it's gotta hurt, no? I mean,
It does. I remember when I was younger, I'd see my sister maybe like getting a weave, and I'd always say to my mum, I want my hair to look like that. But then she would put in braids, and you know, it cost a lot because you have to keep up the maintenance like every 6 weeks. You have to buy the weave itself. Even the relaxer, once you've got new growth, you have to go to the hairdresser and get it relaxed again. So it's very costly.
Yeah.
so what are some of the other stereotypes that you guys have had to battle with over the years that come with being, first of all, a woman, but also a woman of color, a black woman?
So I think just probably on the beauty point. So it's not just hair, but actually even skin color. So you know, there's this thing of colorism where actually the blacker you are, the darker your skin color, you know, you were worse off, you fared worse off in life. And that was very much the case when I was growing up. So actually you have all of these people using like skin lightening creams, you know, trying to make themselves look your complexion effectively, you know, just so that you can actually, you know, you feel better looking in the mirror, but not just looking in the mirror, but also you have better job prospects. And skin lightening and bleaching products, I mean, it's still an epidemic, particularly in Nigeria, in Ghana. You know,
and all of this really comes from this desire
Absolutely.
to conform to a Western stereotype of what beautiful looks like.
Yeah, I think so. It's a very particular type of beauty, and in a really weird way, you get a lot of white women who sort of tan and get sort of surgery and enhancements in order to look like a very particular type of beauty, which is a kind of Kim Kardashian sort of caramel skin tone, you know, wide waist, just kind of, she is an unobtainable body type, and I think that a lot of women, we're all kind of, you know, really dark skin, really pale, kind of trying to converge upon this like this ideal that doesn't exist.
So who are the role models, do you think, that, so if you talk about young black boys, there's a sense that it's either music or it's football, and basically those are the two main role models that at the moment, or two sets of role models that at the moment young black boys get to look up to. What is the state of play when it comes to young black women?
That's a really difficult question, and I think it's really hard. For my daughter, as far as she's concerned, the Obamas are still in power. So, you know, only because, you know, forgetting the politics side of it, but actually for that very point of there not being enough black female role models. So at least I can point to, regardless of how you fare, as I said, on the political side, I can say, well, here was a black woman who, well, to be fair, was first lady of one of the largest economies in the world.
Model, Michelle
you
Obama's
have to. Yeah. You have
massive,
to.
right? But is she the only icon? I mean, we're talking Michelle, Oprah. Is that kind of where it all runs out?
No, I hope not. I feel like, so, for example, a friend of mine, Elizabeth, she recently released a book called Slay in Your Lane, and it sort of showcases lots of different entrepreneurs and sort of public professionals and kind of shows their journey as black women. And reading the book and kind of being in the network that I'm part of, there are so many role models who are so much closer to us than Michelle Obama. I look at people like Louise Brony-Mensah, who founded Shubs, and she was like the only black female to receive Y Combinator funding. I look at people like Rachel Corson from Afrocentrics, who recently won nearly 300K from WeWork. There are just so many more, and they are so much closer to us, and I feel like the more we can actually showcase and show younger people that, you know, you don't have to look at Oprah, you don't have to look at Michelle Obama. There are women and men on your doorstep who are inspirational.
Yeah. Bethel, who are your role models?
I would say a Nigerian author called Chimamanda Adichie.
Yeah.
When I was younger, my mum used to give me her books to read. I don't really think I understood the meaning behind a lot of things she was saying, but every year I would still read those books, and as I got older I started to understand. And I think that's when I was introduced to the whole idea about feminism, because I read we should all be feminists. And my problem initially with feminism was that I felt it was for white women. I felt as if mainstream feminism only really benefited white women. So really just hearing her point of view and just understanding again with that intersectionality is something that I'm so passionate about, because I have been to events where people in the city try to promote diversity, but I'm like the only black female there, or one of two black females there. I went to an event for an investment manager a few weeks ago. I don't want to say the name, but I remember seeing one black girl kind of near the entrance, and I thought, oh, that's going to be the only black girl I'm going to see this evening. But I was so shocked to actually go in there and see Asian females, black females, white females, and I said, this is how you do diversity. Diversity doesn't stop at white women, and I think that's something that we need to start to realise. We need to bring in intersectionality. We need to see how we can reach Asian women, how we can reach black women. I don't have the same experiences as my my Asian friends from university. One of them said to me, actually, she watched a Netflix show. I don't know if you guys have watched this, called Happily Ever After. Have you watched that? It's about this black woman embracing her natural hair. And I had a few problems with the movie, but she came to me, she said, oh, it's really good, you should watch it, it's empowering black women. And I honestly laughed, but she was coming from a perspective where she doesn't really understand the struggles we go through, and I'm not going to pretend that I understand the struggles she goes through, because she's Muslim and she wears a hijab. And to be able to go out and say, okay, this is my religion, when you know you can be physically attacked for that, that's something I will never be able to understand. So I think, again, we need to understand that feminism and really empowering women, it's different for every single group of women. You can't kind of have the same feminism for everybody. Yeah. So she was definitely my role model, because she opened my eyes to that.
Yeah. And often the debate about diversity is so overly focused on gender diversity, and it's a very particular type of gender diversity that focuses on professional middle class white women progressing in professional roles. And so where we don't talk about race, where we don't talk about class, where we don't talk about lived experience, we can't have a proper debate about diversity. So that's a brilliant point. I completely agree.
I think this is the thing, people feel uncomfortable talking about race. They're just not accustomed to the dialogue. So even simple things like calling you black or calling me black is just a very uncomfortable experience.
It doesn't come out the mouth easily.
It's like,
that's why people love BAME.
I
hate the word. Can I just say that?
Me too.
Can we just put it out there?
Me too.
Well, the problem is that it puts everyone into one box, basically.
And it's easy to say. BAME.
Yeah. Well, BAME is cool, black not so much.
I know.
Tell us a little bit more, Marissa. I mean, diversity, you're trying to do a lot in the diversity space. You had a great conversation at Willis Towers Watson the other day, which I was privileged to come to.
That's right. So I think it's about just what we said, making ethnicity just more normal, that conversation and that narrative about it. And what we did at that event last Friday was that we got Dawid along, we got Gavin Lewis from Vanguard along, Justin from Legal in General, and somebody called Jag from Willis Towers Watson. And we basically just wanted to kind of get their experiences, just talk about, and the audience, I mean, it was just seniors in the investment practice at Willis Towers Watson, a predominantly white audience. And I think, you know, the comments that I received afterwards was, this was a really positive experience, you know, just to hear people talk about it. And we also had done a survey just with Willis Towers Watson senior staff, and also with members from the ethnicity work group and from the diversity project. And that was really just about how comfortable do people feel calling somebody black, calling somebody Asian. You know, do you feel comfortable asking about somebody about their hair? Are you comfortable working with somebody who is an ethnic minority? And the responses were very varied. And I think it's just that dialogue that every company needs to have. And I'm really proud of, you know, Willis Towers Watson for taking that step, because it's just about, it's admitting that we don't know it all, but actually we're trying to get the conversation started. So that was what that experience was about.
Yeah, it was powerful. What are some of the messages, do you think, that you would like to land if you are running one of the big shiny corporations out here, and you're the CEO, or you're in charge of recruitment, or you're in the upper echelons? I mean, Izzy, help us with this. What would be a message you'd like to land as they look at diversity? And as you say, for the most part, that kind of means gender. It's broadening out. But are there some hard-hitting messages that you think you might like to?
Yeah, I guess I think the main one is that diversity without inclusion means nothing. And often I think a lot of organisations see diversity as simply recruiting more people who are different. And what ends up happening is that these bright, talented young things like Bethel come and they enter an environment in which they don't feel comfortable, they don't feel like they have a voice, they don't feel like they can contribute and change the environment that they're in. So diversity is important, it's one aspect of it. but focusing on the inclusion, what happens when they get here, what's the environment like, what's the culture like. There needs to be much more focus on that, because we end up seeing situations where brilliant people enter organisations, get frustrated at promotion management practices that have unconscious bias within them, get frustrated at not being able to find a sponsor or a mentor, get frustrated at feeling like the practices within the organisation don't reflect their lived experience or can't help them grow, and then they leave. And what's also happening within these companies is that they are over-recruiting, over-compensating at junior levels, but then when you look at the senior leadership team, it's a snowy white peak. And so we need to do much more in terms of actually getting diverse representation at senior levels, because hiring more people is fantastic, but it's the people in leadership who have these different lived experience that can really fundamentally change everything.
Yeah, I think if you do, it's not changing the snowy white peak is not going to happen by accident. You need to have these quite deep conversations about the ecosystem that's being run out there, which is just hiring a lot of people into these junior roles and then not promoting them. I heard a great quote the other day, which is that diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance.
Absolutely.
And of course, being asked to dance is actually being helped to find your place, and being able to find your place at the table. All too often, I'll speak to usually a young person, either maybe male or female, but just saying, I'm really struggling to find my place, how to be at the table. And this whole thing on inclusion is helping to make that happen.
Yeah, and not just being asked to dance, but being asked to suggest a different song, changing the music, actually being able to...
You don't just necessarily have to dance to that music.
But that's the thing also with the inclusion, it's not just, part of that is accepting people for the unique and diverse talent that they can bring. And I think often when you get into a corporation, you start off as this bright young, unique individual that has all of this talent, and then you start conforming. And particularly I think for black women, it's a hard, because obviously you have the hair issue, which is massive for the black female community. There is what do you wear that can fit your body shape, that's also a big thing. And then obviously the kind of stereotype of not trying to be typecast as the angry black woman, and people too often have this viewpoint that if I'm opinionated, if I'm talking up, it's just because, she's a black woman, she's going to be loud, she's going to be angry, she's going to be aggressive. And if you were to put a white male in that scenario, it's like, well, actually, he's opinionated, he's making his point, he's driving home. And I think that's a stereotype that has a long history in this society, and that we struggle to break. So yeah.
The angry black woman, Bethel, is that something that you kind of the point that Marissa's making, that the way you are is not the same as a 19-year-old white guy who is making the same point in the same way, wouldn't be perceived?
Unfortunately, I know that too well. I remember in sixth form, actually, there was one day in accounting that I was upset about something. I can't really remember what it was. And then someone said to me, "Oh, Bethel, stop being ratchet." And they said it as a joke. And it was only because I am a black female. And I remember my white friend literally turning around and saying, "I'm angry at the same thing too. Why aren't you saying that to me?" And I remember he literally just shut down because, she really called out his bias. And again, I think it was really important for me to see her act as an ally in that way. I think sometimes, you can have, even in the workplace, I guess, white people that will say that they're your ally, but when it comes down to it, can they actually call things out like that? So it was really important for her to actually be able to do that. I think it really strengthened my relationship with her.
Of course.
She's one of my closest friends now, actually. But it was so important.
Just the fact that she called it out for you.
She called it out for me.
Strengthened the bond between you.
Yes, because I feel like if I had said something, it would have been a passing comment. But I think once she said that, everyone kind of was quiet and looked at him like, she's angry too, so why didn't you say anything to her? So it was really just that bias and her calling out and actually being an ally that was so important to me.
So there's a question there. What does it mean to be an ally to black people in the workplace? I think often, particularly white men, and it's really sad because sometimes they're talking to me and they're like, "Oh, but I don't feel like I can say anything," or "I don't feel like it's my debate," or "It makes me uncomfortable."
Yeah.
And if we're really going to tackle this situation, sometimes it can feel like an echo chamber where it's four black people talking about issues and nothing changes. I think the more we can actually involve everyone in the conversation and get have really open, honest conversations with senior leadership. In my last firm, we had a reverse mentoring program, and I was mentoring a partner on diversity. This partner was sort of like 55, 56 years old, didn't have any black friends, was really honest about that. And I was talking to him about what it meant to be first or second generation and what it meant to wear weaves. And his eyes were wide open. He just completely didn't know what I was talking about. And I think the more we can have conversations like that, where people become real instead of just the BAME person, the better the conversation gets.
I think that reverse mentoring is a really important point. You know, the number of questions I've had about, you know, locks. People just can't understand my hair. They just don't understand it. They don't know how I've got into that pattern. They don't know
what do you mean
what I do. They just, it's like, what are you doing? Are you like plaiting? Are you knotting? What happens when it grows out? You know, the incredibly naive question of, are you able to wash it? It's like, well, you just wash your hair like how you normally wash your hair. You know, what is with this? What is this image that you're creating about people, particularly with locks or my type of hairstyle? But I think that ability, as you said, of being able to have that open conversations, I think there's a bit on us as part of the black community to actually, you know, not be so sensitive about certain things and actually just be willing to have that conversation. But also, you know, almost as a kind of open call and message, well, actually, you know, gauge your audience, but obviously being able to just ask somebody, well, okay, I just want to talk to you about being black, you know, tell me about your experiences. And I think that's a really helpful. And we need to recognize that people do make mistakes, but the fact that they're trying matters. So they won't always get it right. When somebody asks me a question about my hair, or asks me, you know, how come you speak English, or, you know, where did you come from, how did you end up here? Actually, I take it as a kind of, well, okay, an open statement, like, okay, you want to find out, let me tell you about it. I have spoken about slavery so many times to explain my surname. It's funny, and people just didn't know. And I think it's that willingness to just be open and have that conversation.
So are you okay with having the big conversation then? I mean, Izzy, how would you recommend someone who's white, they want to engage, but they just like, I just don't know how to even start having the conversation. What's a good way to go?
It's a really tricky one, and I think that it's like we said, it's really important to be open and honest about it. And so, for example, my husband's English, and so he gets this on the daily from me that I'll try and explain things, and he'll ask open questions and try to be as open-minded as possible. And I find that if you, for example, a colleague, he said that he was really woke in the office the other day. And
let's talk about work.
I don't actually know what that means.
Me and my other
work is a new consciousness.
And me and my black colleague, we went like this to each other, and I carried on working, but she was like, "No, I've got this."
What was the look?
That was a look.
And the thing is, and we ended up it was 30 people in an office, and so he's sitting there and she's there. Everyone went quiet, and so it was just her saying to him, you can't really say that. It's not, you're not using it in the right context. And we ended up having a very in-depth conversation where he found a New York Times article and he sent it to us, and he was like, wow, yeah, I get what you're saying now, the appropriation of the word woke. And it was a really rewarding conversation because I saw that he wanted to learn, and we were willing to just show him and teach him, and kind of he was like, yeah, like I won't use it in the wrong context again. Fantastic. It was the rest of the office that were completely silent, who were kind of nervously kind of going,
we don't want to have this conversation.
That was more of a worry for me than the guy that was just being like, okay, I've said something that wasn't quite appropriate, let me just correct myself. Yeah. It's fantastic.
So there's a huge educational process. So what about you, Beth? I mean, what advice would you give if someone wants to engage and have a sensible conversation, wants to understand where you're coming from and how they can help?
I think listening, sometimes we all like to talk, I love to talk, but I think just taking your time and really listening to what people have to say, even with, the push towards kind of diversity by pushing women in the financial services, and that was really important. And I don't think that would have happened without the cooperation of the men who were in senior leadership position. So again, they need to cooperate with people of colour, and they need to cooperate with women of colour. So again, there would be that inclusion. In workplaces, inclusion needs to happen, because I've got Muslim friends, for example, and they worry about going to a workplace that won't have space for them to be able to pray. Something like that, just making people feel really comfortable in the workplace, is so important. Even like Black History Month, I think kind of celebrating that in the workplace is something that's really important. I remember at school I used to love doing that, even though people would make comments about, oh, what about White History Month? And to me, I would always reply, are white people oppressed? And then they wouldn't be able to give an answer. So I think just little things like that really helping people feel comfortable, so people don't have to conform, and they're still themselves in the workplace, or even a better version, and they're able to kind of develop personally that way. I think that's really important. But back to your point about how I would help someone, I think, again, just having that conversation and saying, this is what's happened, this is how I feel, this is how you can improve that. And I think if they don't want to do anything after that, it really just kind of shows that it's the diversity is just something they've put on their website. You know, we're a really diverse company. We love collaboration. And now that I'm really looking at my career, that's important to me. Where I really start my career in an organisation that I believe genuinely is diverse. I love asking people in careers departments of different organisations that I've been to, so what's your diversity like? And the immediate reaction on their face tells the whole story. I remember there was a consulting firm, and he came into my university to speak about their grad scheme, and I asked him, oh, what's your diversity like? And his reaction, even before he said anything, just really told me that he was about to tell a load of lies that wasn't true.
Why is diversity, thank you Bethel, that's very powerful, why is diversity so important? One of the questions that people who run these large corporations often ask is, well, why does it matter? Why don't we just get the best person for the job? Why always focus on getting diversity? First it's women, now it's people of color, black people. Like, really? What do you say to that?
Oh, so I think there are a number of things I'd say to that. So I think, first of all, diversity is important because actually being able to access the widest talent pool possible is good business. So if effectively all you're picking from is a narrow private school educated white, Oxford graduate, then effectively you are not tapping into the code breaker who was born in, some poor part of London. You're not getting into that wide talent pool. And it's also all about cognitive diversity. So that ability to be able to get people from, different backgrounds, to be able to put different experiences and into the mix. So I think diversity just makes good business sense. And then the final point to that is representation. So, we do talk quite a lot about cognitive diversity and making better decisions. But also, actually, if you're a black doctor, treating somebody with AIDS, for instance, you might be able to have some kind of, whether it be through common language or through common experience, just having that ability to tap into people with different backgrounds actually can make your customers, your clients, your patients just feel more comfortable. It's just logical, and I don't know why the system has been constructed to just be so narrow.
Yeah, the statistics definitely back that up.
Absolutely.
So I think the stat is that organisations that have more gender diversity actually perform 58% better than their counterparts without. So the research demonstrates that it makes good business sense to have diversity. And so tech is kind of what I focus on, and we know that sort of only 19% of the British UK tech workforce is female and only 15% are black. That's a problem. And it's a problem when you look into the fact that technology is being built that has the potential to change the complete future of our universe. And if there isn't diverse perspectives in the room, then we will get into trouble. For example, facial recognition systems that don't recognise black faces, or if you look into robotic assistants like Siri and Alexa, it's no coincidence that they are female voices. And the young generation at the moment, really young kids, don't know the difference between Alexa and a woman, and they're being taught that they can say things like, Alexa, stop, Alexa, do what I want, Alexa, give me something, and Alexa responds.
Absolutely.
And they can't make that distinction when they're that young. And why are soothing voices, on the train, or Alexa or Siri, women's voices? However, when it comes to alerting you of danger, telling you to mind the gap, the male voices. Ask ourselves these questions about the ethical and kind of gender biases within the technology we're creating, and then we can actually make better products that address human needs and that make everyone feel more included if we just have different perspectives in the room. It makes good business sense to be more diverse.
And it's interesting your point about facial recognition, because it's almost a security point. If you have a technological system that can only recognize white faces, then how is that going to protect you from just a wide variety of threats that you could have to your organization?
Yeah, or algorithms, Google's algorithms, where so I think with there's the American a system in America that actually uses AI to determine how long prison sentences should be or something like that. And they actually found biases in it which give black people disproportionately large sentences based on past crimes and demographic information. And that bias is built within the system, but obviously technology isn't racist. It's the people that are building these systems that actually need to be held accountable for how they actually distinguish between male, female, LGBT, age, race. And if they're not doing that, because there's no one going, sorry, Tim.
Sorry, Tim. We're putting on the Tim, aren't we?
That's a very interesting point. Actually, I've been spending some time working with some offenders down in Swellside Prison, and some of these guys are doing some seriously long sentences. Young black guys, 22 years old, facing 30, 35 years, and there is a sense that they're doing very, very long sentences. Now, obviously, for crimes, you need to pay the price, but some of these sentences are incredibly long. A very interesting point you make there about the algorithms that decide. No idea whether that plays out in this mix or not. I suppose the final point that I've always thought about the importance of having someone who's black in senior places in the organization, of course, is that if you don't see anyone there who looks like you, then you immediately end up with this self-limiting belief that I'm never going to get there, because guess what? It's a snowy white peak that's never going to change. Why would I make it through the system? Well, you look up and you see someone who looks a bit like you. With 1, 2 people, suddenly you're like, well, if they did that, then I can do that.
The amount of young men that said, I can be president one day after Obama came to power. Young women and men, in a way that just would never, parents slap it out of the head before they came into power.
But this is why I like your point when it comes to role models, because actually just bringing it closer to home. And if I think about role models, I think, well, actually for me, it would be my mother, who was a black woman who is a survivor, who worked incredibly hard and to achieve what she has. And I think just being able to point to someone, whether it be your mother, your auntie, your sister, just someone else that you can say, well, look at what they've done, look at how they've achieved it. That's really important. And I do worry, even for my daughter, yes, I can point to my mother for myself, but my mom's in Trinidad. Who can I point to here in society? Who can I tap into? So just getting the literature, as you said, with the book that you're talking about, or just having the media have better portrayal of black women is so important, because I genuinely believe that, we are taught racism. It's a societal construct. When my daughter, was just born, she knew nothing. She still knows nothing, because we almost deliberately avoid topic, because she's only 6, and we just don't want her to point to the kid in the playground and say, oh, it's that black kid. Actually, she just said, well, it's the kid with the polka dot dress and the green tights and the whatever, even if it's painfully obvious to us. And it's all about just everybody's different. Everything is different. And she just knows that, and that's because of how I've tried to raise her. But we just don't have that example of role models anywhere. Anyway.
Are you optimistic for the future, Bethel? You're 19. You're an undergrad. You're at Newcastle. Where are you in your head? How optimistic are you?
I think things are getting better, and I just wanted to quickly touch on the point about why you said diversity was important. I remember when the financial crisis happened, I was 9, so I had no idea about the mania that was going on around me. But when I was 17, for some reason, I don't know what it was, but I seemed to have this obsession with the financial crisis, because to me I was just thinking, how could a few characters cause something that was able to affect the world in such a disastrous way. And at that time I was also studying accounting, so I really wanted to get into finance in that way. And I started researching, and a lot of these people that were in senior positions, like you said, tend to be the white men that graduated from Oxford, or maybe had a privileged life, and they all think the same way. So it's that idea of diversity of thought being really good for business, because if you have people that think the same way and differently, you're not going to make the same decisions, and we're not going to kind of repeat the things of the past that have happened. And so I think that's really important. And also what you're talking about, role models. I told you the story about 2 weeks ago. When I was 16, I was invited to some workshops with Goldman Sachs, and I had a brief idea about Goldman Sachs being this really large investment bank. And to me it was this kind of community that I wouldn't be able to get into because of my gender, my race. However, there was a lady there, and she was an associate, and she was black, and just seeing her in that position really made me feel like, I can actually do this, I can be part of this community. It might take a little while for me to get there, or I might have struggles in front of me, but I could definitely do it.
But just seeing it,
just seeing her there.
And we all do it, when we go into the room, we're like,
it's the nod. It's the nod. Yeah, we have. It's just
immediately changes your kind of
if
you're on edge, or you're a bit guarded, immediately it kind of dissipates.
But I think it's just that relatedness, and as human beings, regardless of your race, you want that level of relatedness. You want to know that actually I can aspire to be that person. I belong here. I feel part of the community. And so, I mean, I'm completely with you. There are often times when I'd walk into a room, and if there's one black person there, you just see like smiles. It's like, wow, it's like special smile, But it shouldn't be like that. It should be that actually you get smiles all around, and actually you're intrigued by, right, who is this new person that's coming to speak to me about whatever this interesting topic is? Instead of that kind of constant search for, right, let me credentialize you, let me just make sure that you're worthy of standing up in front of me to speak. Why do I need to, why do we...
Do you find that you need to just credentialize yourself just before
I do, and this is why, for me, I've all throughout my career and all throughout my life, I have... It's to your point about you almost feel like if you have to be perfect and overachieve to get to the same place. So, I remember kind of growing up, I went to a state primary school in Trinidad. It wasn't a very rich school, to say the least. There were kids who were hungry, that sort of stuff. And I was, one of the bright kids, so I went to one of the best secondary schools, but it was purely based, it's what we had common entrance. So basically, if you get a certain grade, you get to go to one of these schools. But that, once again, was also a state school. And, I was definitely not one of the richest kids there. And I remember going to one of my friend's house, and seeing her house was just like, I want this. How do I get this? Okay, I need to work hard. But at that time, everybody around me was black. So I kind of had like, okay, well, if I work really, really hard and I get really, really smart, then I'll do this. So I destroyed, GCSEs, destroyed A levels. And then I moved over here, and I was like, wait a minute, that combination doesn't quite work. It's not a straight map between you working really, really hard and you getting what you want. Actually, there are all of these other factors that come in, like, do you speak the right lingo? Did you go to the right school? Do you know how to play golf? Did you internship at Goldman Sachs? Did you have the right hair? And I think I just couldn't figure it out. Even up to now, I kind of put it down to a little bit of luck, a little bit of skill. What is that combination that makes you succeed in a society like this? And for people who say it's all about meritocracy, I would point to the very issue that we're not all on the same starting point. Even for me, just the fact that my parents went to university means that I'm on a different starting point from somebody who grew up in a single parent household. And my favorite quote is, one I heard from a company, it was Fearless Futures, which basically said, privilege is invisible to those who have it. So you don't know that you're privileged, because actually you have it. You know that you're one step ahead of life. You know that your parents had good jobs. You knew that you didn't have to worry about where your next meal came from, and you're starting from that position. That's not fair. And so what companies need to do actually is to get access to that poor kid that was on free school meals, that basically didn't have a chance. They need to start assessing things and measuring it and looking for competencies that they think meet the values of their organization. So for my organization, what am I looking for? I'm looking for grit. I'm looking for adaptability. I'm looking for creativity. Do I necessarily get those three from having a first-class honors degree, or do I get that from going to Oxford or Harvard or whichever school you're going to? Actually, I can get that from the kid that worked in a supermarket who basically stacked shelves every summer but found different and new ways of stacking those shelves. And how do we start assessing those things? We need to work a lot harder to do that.
Yeah, and I feel like that is, this is one thing from a corporate perspective, and I feel like some corporates are moving in the right direction, for example, getting rid of university qualifications and kind of introducing more kind of pre-16 and pre-18 support for schools, etc. In the startup space, it's very different, and in an environment in which you have to be gritty as hell in order to actually succeed, where your network is everything in terms of funding, getting that support initially. If you're a young woman or a minority entrepreneur, it's very tough, and often, so I coach entrepreneurs, and when I'm having conversations with young men, often it's, I have a product and how can you help me? That's the conversation. Whereas with young women and aspiring entrepreneurs of colour, often it's kind of, you know, I've had this idea for a long time and I've kind of done quite a bit around it, and this is what it looks like, but I'm not really sure. I kind of don't really know where to go, and I don't see myself as an entrepreneur. And often when you kind of, when you talk to them, it's a lot about confidence and self-esteem building, and you hardly ever get into the, so how can you actually help me advance this product? And so I feel like there needs to be so much more support for young people when they're at that pivotal point in terms of deciding what career they're going to have, whether they want to start a business, and helping them think through that process. However, we may overly focus on people who are quite already there. So I want to be an actuary, or I want to work in FS, or I want to be an entrepreneur. And then there's quite a bit of support there. But so many young people get left behind when they're less sure and they don't know what networking events to go to, and they have no idea who Goldman Sachs is, and they live in Edmonton, and you know, mum's on benefits and needs their help to look after their younger sister, and they get really left behind.
And it's interesting, that point about the confidence of women in particular, and you know, the idea that they are sort of less sure about necessarily what they want, and I think that feeling of self-doubt is very, you know, across all races. You know, that feeling of self-doubt is something that for women is very much a part of us. We aren't as overconfident as our male counterparts, and particularly when you're an ethnic minority, when you're black, for instance, that's like a kind of double whammy on top of that.
Yeah,
I think it's building that confidence.
We're taught that in order to be socially attractive as women, we need to make ourselves modest. And when you promote yourself, or when you speak about your achievements, you're seen as bragging. Whereas a young man in the same situation is seen as being authoritative or assertive or showing leadership potential.
Absolutely.
So you get taught by society that you need to make yourself small, and as an entrepreneur, that's the easiest way to fail. So it's actually so important that we don't not only teach those hard skills, like how do you actually get into this industry, but focus so much on that self-esteem, that confidence building, that leadership potential, and actually saying to young people that, you know, you can be absolutely anything you want to be, and this is how you do it. And I just don't think that we necessarily do enough of that.
So your point about being leaders, I was having this debate at university actually, because someone was saying that yes, you know, women don't tend to be assertive, they don't tend to kind of take risk or leadership positions, and I said, why do you think that is? And I believe that, you know, yes, there can be genetic factors, but at the same time we learn things from our environment. And I was saying, to my friend, that it's so important that, you know, there are programs that actually teach young girls, okay, this is how you can develop these leadership skills. For example, one summer, I was 16, I led a campaign kind of focusing on mental illness after meeting someone who had severe social anxiety, and my mum's a mental health nurse. However, I felt as if I couldn't speak to her and I didn't know how to deal with that. So I thought, okay, it's really important we get young people talking about mental illness. And that was my first time I'd ever led anything really, and that way I was able to develop my leadership skills. But at the same time, I realised that there are other girls who aren't as confident as me. I have friends who don't even want to do public speaking at university if we have to present something, and you know, but you see the guys go up there and they think, oh, you know, I'm so great, I'm this and that, and it, you know, it saddens me because I realise that, you know, sometimes it's things they learn from their environment. If they see other women not being as assertive, or you know, not being able to be as confident or take up leadership positions, they kind of feel like, okay, maybe I should step back. So I think it's really important we have programs that focus on leadership and really helping young females in sixth form, you know, even in university, when you start out your career, really develop those leadership skills. How do you expect them to be good leaders if you don't allow them to develop those skills?
And it goes into adulthood. You look at senior leaders, and so I'm constantly recruiting for keynote speakers, for mentors, for judges for my programs, and men overwhelmingly put themselves forward. You would be shocked that I'm running a program in January and all of the speakers are male.
Yeah.
That's the complete opposite of what I want, but that's just who put themselves forward. When you don't have any time, you don't really have the time to go out there. And what happens when I really want women, and I put that into the sort of post or the advert or the newsletter, I get women suggesting their friends.
Absolutely.
I'm like, Jesus Christ, we really need to actually have more women who are confident putting themselves forward, and also have more programs in which we explicitly say, you know, not just women-focused program, you know, general conferences, general events that actually make a point of having 50% panel representation of women and going out to communities and asking, as opposed to waiting for them to come to you.
I need to jump in because this has just been a fabulous conversation. I feel like we could just keep going, but thank you so much. Izzy Obeng, thank you so much for joining us. Marissa Hall and Bethel Ahonzi. I can't tell you, what a great discussion. I feel like in some way we have done a little bit towards making that snowy peak a little less snowy maybe. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. This has been Talk About Black, and we've been talking about what it means to be a black woman in 2018 and in the years to come. So thank you very much indeed for watching, and we'll be back soon. Thank you.